And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Food.
I was looking in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. For my monster from his slab began to rise, and suddenly to my surprise, he did the monster mash. He did the mash, the monster mash. The monster mash, it was a graveyard smash. He did the mash, it caught on in a flash. He did the mash, the monster mash. Flow from the laboratory in the castle east. Flow to the master bedroom with a vampire feast. The ghouls all came from their humble abode to get a joke from my electro. He did the mash, the monster mash. The monster mash, it was a graveyard smash. The monster mash, it caught on in a flash. The monster mash. Whoa. Have a happy Halloween.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us in just a few ghoulish moments will be Cindy Dunstan Quirk. She is going to be joining us. I am so excited to be able to share our conversation with you. I still cannot believe it's October, and by the sound of our Halloween theme for the month of October, that really identified it for me. My gosh, it feels like it was just 4th of July. I don't know where this year has gone. Well, let's go into our fact of the week. French poodles did not originate in France, but in Germany. Poodles comes from a German Pudel, or Pudihund, meaning splashing dog. Some scholars speculate the poodle's puff of hair evolved from hunters shaved the poodle for more efficient swimming, while leaving the pom-poms around the major joints to keep them warm. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I didn't even know that myself. Well, by that sound, Cindy is about to enter the podcast studio. So with that said, my little ghouls and goblins, welcome Cindy Dunstan Quirk to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
All right, this week on the podcast, we are joined by one of my most favorite people to watch. I kid you not, I love watching her on Facebook Live, and there is just so many different things that I'm looking forward to talking with her about. And we're going to start by introing her in because she is a celebrity, and we are very fortunate to have Cindy Dunstan Quirk in the podcast studio. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I love to talk about myself and Scout and Zoe, basically. So
Scout and Zoe is amazing, and I'm going to tell you, you've put together a brand that is above the rest, and that's one thing that caught my attention immediately. But like I said, I love watching your Facebook Lives, and you literally are entertaining. You are a great show in just, I don't even know where to go with. So I always like to go with, tell us your origin story. How did Cindy Dunstan Quirk become who she is today?
You mean in relation to Scout and Zoe's, or just
you
before that?
Just you in itself.
Well, let's see. I grew up in South Georgia, down in Jimmy Carter country, and I'm a middle child, so there you go. That's why I have to compete for attention. And I'm one of three girls, so I'm the middle of three girls. And I think that my dad, I'm more like my dad was than my mom. However, because he was a salesperson, so I get the gregarious side from him, but I get my wit from both of them, and my quick wit from my mother, because she was a nurse. She was a surgical nurse, so she was very, very quick-witted with the doctors, and had absolutely. I mean, she had a respect for the doctors, but she just showed them no mercy. You know, they were hers to bend over and do what she pleased with them. And she just had that's who I am. That they made me who I am, and they told me that I could be or do anything that I could or wanted to. And by golly, they were right. So I'm loving that. And there's Scout.
Hey, look at that. Making a rare appearance. This is awesome. Well, hi, Scout.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to actually add Scout to the actual artwork so that he can work himself into this.
There you go.
I one thing I always tell everybody is that I love sound in the back. I hate that sterile sound, so it's great that Scout decided to join in and say hi. That is awesome.
And he will, and Ziva will be around in a little bit. I'm outside giving them some playtime since we were in the warehouse all day packing orders. So they'll be in and out. So it will not be a sterile environment here. You will hear nature sounds. You'll hear dogs barking, and because a squirrel, that's what he was barking at, was a squirrel going up a tree. So.
Well, it's funny because like my dogs will they both Akitas, they love bunnies, they love squirrels, and being raw fed, of course, they don't realize that. Oh, but you know what? If I change that could be a little bit primal, but still, that's dinner. But they they love the movement of them, but neither one are barkers, which is funny, unless you tell them it's okay to bark. I wish they would bark more. I really do. I love
Scout and Ziva bark all the time. So sometimes be careful what you wish for, because you might get it. And Scout and Ziva are definitely not wallflowers. When they're around, like FedEx comes to the warehouse or UPS comes to the warehouse, they knock on the door, or somebody passes by the front windows, and everybody knows the dogs are there, because I don't need a doorbell because I have the dogs.
Well, I'll take it. I will take my comment back. You're right. When somebody comes to the door, that's when they do bark. Mm-hmm. And being Akitas, it's more of a woof. It's got a real good sound to it. I love it. It's petrifying to anybody who comes by. It's like unwanted. I need that on my front door. I take that back. I do like when Amazon shows up. That is always fun. Well, now, we were talking before we actually started recording about Scout and Zoe's. And, of course, I always love to know how the idea came about, what was the origin story, and kind of take us through all that. Because one thing that I found really interesting was we both agree that the brands that we've created aren't ours. They belong to our actual furry friends. They're the founders.
They are. And Scout and Zoe's was born, or the company was born out of a need for Zoe to have something to chew on, because she had, bless her heart, when she was only 6 months old, we found out that she had allergies, and she struggled with those. She passed away in 2014 at the age of 14. So she struggled with those, and I struggled with them for her entire life. And one of her biggest allergies was to beef, so she could never have any bones or anything to chew on. So that's how the antler dog chews, which was our first product, that's how those came to be. It was something that she could chew on that didn't irritate her allergies. And then we had Scout, who had allergies to chicken. So I mean, we always get these dogs that have these really specialized diets or needs for specialized diets. So that's how the antler dog chews came around. I tested them and found out they worked for my dogs, and then I started using, giving my friends them the antlers, and then they said, well, this is pretty cool. You should do this. So that's how I started, was with 5 sizes of antler dog chews, and that was way back in 2010. And over the course of time, the Chinese chicken jerky started killing dogs and cats, and making them sick. So that's how the treats came in. We had chicken jerky and sweet potatoes and carrots first, and then that took off. And once that took off, it's kind of like, oh, well, I need to do more treats. And that's I think the next fall, I added venison and beef and some kangaroo and, just started doing really esoteric proteins and that dogs weren't exposed to, so they weren't allergic to it. And that's how basically the company came into being, is just through needs that my dogs had. And, I just tried to solve them. It was never about the money. It was always about trying to help my dogs.
It's we were talking about this even before. It's funny how our dogs become such an inspiration for something that we would never have thought this is a path we're going to take. But because of the way that unfortunately pet food has gone down, we've all been forced to kind of find that alternative. And again, I completely understand. I have a dog that has allergies to chicken as well. And the other one is allergic to beef, has the allergy to beef.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
it was put to me in an interesting way. Somebody said, and right here on the podcast, they said, the allergies are because of what the cows, the chickens, whatever, are being fed on these farms. So if they're being fed, wheat and grains and different things, then that's what's being exposed to them, and then your dogs are consuming it. And that was an interesting concept. I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate. I haven't tested the theory, but I get that. And so we're forced. We can't do commercial pet food because, well, obviously.
You could, but you probably don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, but when you think about,
I don't want to.
Yeah,
I feed raw, and I don't. I mean, once I started down that path of nutrition for my dogs, especially since Zoe had allergies, the current thing at the time for her was, we'll just feed you the prescription from the vet. And once I started going down that path, and it's like, this isn't. I started looking at the label. It's like, this is really kind of nasty food.
Mm-hmm.
And that now, now I know way more. I wish I knew then what I know now about pet nutrition, because if I had, I think Zoe would have lived a better, longer, happier life, because now I feed the dogs raw and they are thriving. Got rid of Scout's intestinal troubles that he had on and off for a good portion of his life. We could talk just one podcast about just nutrition. And that is, I know more than my vet does, and he admits it. And that's kind of sad.
Well, if you haven't noticed, most of mine are about nutrition. I love talking about nutrition. It's literally like my favorite topic, especially when it comes to dogs and cats. It is, There's just never enough good conversations to have about this because, again, as we were discussing before, there's an increase in people wanting to know, okay, what's my alternative? What is my options here? Am I stuck with Big Pet Food, who is buying up all of these companies who are quality and, of course, tanking them? And so what do I do? And, being in the Midwest, it is a little bit difficult here because a lot of people, they are still stuck on the old times. They're used to it. Their dads, their moms, they fed XYZ to their dog. Their grandfathers did. Changing the mindset is a little bit harder. And I mean, I've seen it. Maybe you've seen a better change than I have. At least from Missouri, it's a little bit like, no, we still feed. And I mean, you talked about the bottom barrel, and they think that it's quality. It's been a little difficult for me to change that mindset. But the other part that's very difficult for me here is we don't really have a lot of good places to actually get pure meat. I can't go to a co-op. I don't have any here. And finding farms here is a little difficult. Do you find that that's a difficult challenge for you, or are you actually lucky enough to have those options?
We don't have a co-op here. The co-op that I found is in Michigan, and they only deliver once a month or once every 2 months. But I found a local butcher who sources. I mean, they raise all of the products that they sell, which is fabulous. And they have grinds for dogs and cats. And it just so happens that we will be debuting those grinds under the Scout and Zoe's brand in about 2 weeks. So we'll have turkey and beef with mackerel and beef and lamb. And I'm going to try, they have chicken, but I don't really care for, I think there are better things. And then we have the raw cart burgers that we came out with last week at Super Zoo. So everything is traceable back to the source, back to the fisherman or the lake that it came out of, or the farmer that raised the cattle. And I mean, I think that we're very lucky to have that resource at our fingertips. In fact, I'm going to go pick up dog food for them tomorrow. And I usually I go a couple of times a month, and I buy a couple $100 each time I go and fill up the freezer. We just bought another freezer just for dog food.
It's almost kind of a necessity. Sometimes you just kind of have to. And it is cheaper that way too. That's another thing that a lot of people don't understand. And a question I'm always asked is, how can you do it economically? Well, I mean, obviously large is less, even though it doesn't always make a lot of sense. But think about it from Costco, Sam's Club, any of those big box stores that actually sell in bulk. Less usually cost a little less. So that's an option. Now,
sure.
Biggest challenge you had when you started Scout and Zoe's?
Was logistics.
Mm-hmm.
Because figuring out an inexpensive way to ship products was, especially just starting out, because, you didn't have volumes of orders that were going out. And that kind of ended very quickly as far as being a challenge, because I figured out, especially since we sell mostly, we have a direct-to-consumer website that is scoutandzoes.com, but the majority of our business is wholesale, so that we ship out larger orders to the retail stores. So that wasn't very challenging for very long. And now it's just really second nature. As long as the carrier does their job, then, I really don't have much to worry about. But, when the carrier doesn't do their job and things kind of run off the rails, it's always a really big challenge and can be a real problem.
One thing I will say is, and it's really anything that has to do with shipping, whether it's an envelope with a card in it or an actual package itself, there is no such thing as good service anymore. You would think that you would think that. You would think it would be.
Yeah, but it's just like, just do your job that I'm paying you for, and everything will be fine. And I know you're going to bring this up, so case in point, Super Zoo was last week. The Super Zoo, for the uninitiated, is the largest trade show in the pet industry. Actually, there's two. One is global and one is Super Zoo, but Super Zoo in Las Vegas is by far the biggest. And I shipped my booth out, 2 pallets. One had my booth on it, one had my products on it. And one pallet made it, one pallet didn't, and the booth didn't make it. So it got shipped out on the 14th of June. It just arrived back in my warehouse today on the 6th of July, and I had never seen it. I didn't receive it for Super Zoo, so I had products but nothing to display them on. So I had to initiate a plan B pretty quickly, and I think it all worked out. But what a big pain in the rear that was, because nobody knew where it was for days, actually for about a week. And then, it kind of zigzagged the country a couple of times, and I'm fighting with the carrier now because they just charged me. I just got an invoice for the shipment out to Las Vegas, and they're saying that I owe this money because the shipment was not only on time, but it was received in its entirety. So logistics can be really, really, really tricky when they don't work correctly.
And when they don't work correctly, yeah. And it's kind of like having employees in a sense. It's just kind of a third party. They're not working, but you got to pay them, even though they're not getting the job done. That's just frustrating. And what's great is that anybody who has watched your Facebook Lives, we've all kind of been lucky enough to kind of follow along, and we were there with you while you were at Super Soup. I like I told you, I try not to, flood somebody's messages and go, oh, this, and interact too much. But I did find myself watching it intently. I mean, Claire was at basketball practice. I was watching different things you were doing live. It was absolutely very entertaining, and it helped me because I wanted to be there so bad. Actually, I would have liked to have been there. I would have probably done something to help you out because I would have.
It would have been appreciated. But between Home Depot and a couple of people who were already there, who are just very, very dear friends of mine, and gave up a day and a half to help me do this. But it all worked out, and I think because of the Facebook Lives, I had people coming up during the show and saying, "Oh, your booth arrived. We've been following that." It's like, no, it didn't. This is Plan B. Or we've been following you on Facebook. I never imagined. I mean, I knew social media was powerful, but the power of showing up frequently and doing those live live updates really, really drove a lot of interest in the company and people stopping by the booth or what turned out to be the booth at that event. So I'm convinced I need to do more of them.
I found it to be extremely entertaining. Like I told you, when you do them, and this is before Super Zoo, I still would watch your stuff, and it was entertaining. You have a very charismatic, funny way about it. It's like you don't, it's not scripted. It's not artificial. It's funny. And I was like, oh man, I had hoped, and I'm going to speak for everybody who watched. I think we were all rooting for it to arrive. We're like, come on. And then
it did not. It actually, after the booth got set up, or what turned out to be Plan B, when that got set up Monday afternoon, and I actually was sitting in the convention hall in somebody else's booth waiting on them to get done. I got a call from FedEx that the booth was in New York.
Oh my God.
It was in Montgomery, New York for some reason. And it spent its time, the rest of the week until today, zigzagging across the country. And it never made it.
Wow. I mean, I don't understand why it would go east and not more west. It just,
who knows?
That's so
I'm
weird.
still trying to figure that out. It's just crazy. And that would be, I know you're going to ask that, but that would be my soapbox moment.
I figured that you were taking on, and so I was like, hey, you know what? You got it. I knew that this was going to be it. I knew that they were going to be the soapbox moment. Outside of any delivery, is there another soapbox moment that you have that comes to mind?
Well, I think the bigger picture, or the bigger soapbox moment, is if you engage someone, or when I engage someone for services or a product or to do something, it's like just do the job that I paid you to do. Mm-hmm. That's a huge soapbox for me, is that I don't pay you to do it halfway. Mm-hmm. I don't pay you to ignore it. I pay you to do the job. And if it's done very, very well, that's a bonus. And if it's done beyond my expectations and you've elevated my expectations, that's even more of a bonus. And I'll come back and do more business with you. But the other big soapbox moment is, which kind of ties into the logistics, is to do what you're engaged to do. Like people buy products from us, and we want to not only give them what they expect, but we want to give them more. We want to give them like the best experience that they can ever have, the best treat their dog has ever had in its mouth, and so that pup or that cat or that horse or small animal can live the longest, happiest, healthiest life ever. So that's what we do, and we endeavor to do that every single day, every moment of every day. And that's the vigor that I look at when I engage someone for a job in any capacity. That's how I expect them to do it, and that's not always the case. So
Yeah, it's rough because
It's very frustrating.
you put so many high standards on yourself. You just want people to at least put half of that. If people could just live up to half of what you put on yourself, it would still be done. It may not be done your way, but it would be done, and that at least it's efficient and it's done. But man, when you're paying someone to do something and you're doing the job for them, or you're not getting it done, it's just it's a killer. I totally get that.
It's very aggravating, and that's a huge pet peeve for me. So there you go.
Well, I could say it whether I'm going out to eat and my food was just not made accordingly, or I don't really eat meat, so I'll go to Taco Bell, but instead of having beef, I'll have beans in place. And it'll frustrate me if they don't put a spork in there, or if they get it wrong. That stuff gets me frustrated. And it's the same thing. It's you had one job, just do it. Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do what you're asked. Yeah.
I totally get it. Well, I'm going to go into some of your product line because, as I told you, I loved the variety. And I just think that what you're doing is amazing. And again, being that I would really say more of a Facebook Live superstar, and Scout and Zoe's is the company you work for. But and I'm surprised Scout didn't chime in and say yes, she does work for me.
Yeah,
because again,
it
I
is his
totally get
company.
that.
Yeah.
But I loved one of the things. I was expecting a little bit more of them being named the first product, excuse me, is Scout's Bone, and I was like, when I read that one, as I was going through the list, I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a bunch of them named after your dogs, which I would totally do that, and I totally get that. So it's like, oh, there's gonna be a bunch of them, and it wasn't. So I was like, oh, poor Scout, you only got one. I'm sorry.
Well, but Ziva has her own monthly subscription service, and Zoe, Scout and Zoe have the company named after them, so that's a plus there. But the way that I tend to name things is that I tend to just call them what they are, because that way there's more transparency, that people don't have to figure out what a Duck Delight is. I mean, we have a product called Duck Delights, and the delight portion of it is that it's so highly nutritious that you probably can't get anything any more nutritious for a dog. But chicken jerky is named chicken jerky, kangaroo is named kangaroo. It's just, they're not humorous or funny. It's very descriptive, so that people know without spending a lot of time looking at it what it is.
A lot of times people don't read descriptions, so I completely get that. I get that reference completely. Yet I like to read all about everything. I want to know everything. I get it. People don't. It's so I understand coming up with it. I mean, a lot of them are great treats for dogs. For like, a lot of people wonder, well, how do you get your dog to do different things? Well, it's reward them. And how do you reward a dog? With treats. I mean, they're food motivated.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
It's like you got banana carrot treats, which honestly, I'm sorry to my dogs, but that sounds delicious just for me itself.
They are. And you know that I eat most of the treats.
I bet.
I'm not a big fish fan, but I've tried all of our treats, except for the lamb lung, because I think that's pretty disgusting. But the dogs love it. But I do. My favorite bakery treat is the banana rounds. They taste like banana muffins. And then I've been known, last year at Super Zoo, I couldn't get away to get any lunch, so I ate the chicken and apple bites, the jerky that I had. And it's wonderful. I'd rather eat that than a $13 hot dog, because at least I know what's in my treat.
Yeah. Hot dogs really are on my list of
Yeah.
it's a mystery box of I don't want to try that. But there you go, though.
Yeah.
It's human grade, which again, back to a conversation we had where within the last year, everybody really wants to make sure that their pet treats are human grade. If I can eat them, then they must be healthy for my dog or cat. And that's what you figured out. And that's what makes all the sense.
Absolutely, and it's really they are human grade. They're all, and that's why they border on expensive. That's why they're in the high end of cost for treats, is because they're made here in the United States. They're sourced from human grade raw ingredients that you can find in your kitchen, and the only thing that's imported is the kangaroo, and that comes from Australia. But everything is made in a USDA inspected, FDA inspected facility, and when those things aren't cheap. So the chicken is made in a facility where just down the road from where they are sent to chicken heaven, and they're not in chicken heaven longer than a couple hours before they're turned into jerky. So it's fresh, and I eat it. And I don't know many people who own treat companies that would put their products in their mouths. So I'm sure Big Pet Food wouldn't. But I'm really a stickler for that, because if I won't eat it, how can I justify giving it to my dogs? And if I won't give it to my dogs, why would you want to give it to yours? Or why would I even sell it to give it to yours? So that's a huge point. That would be probably the third soapbox thing right there, is why would you give your dog something to eat that you wouldn't?
That's the big thing. And I don't get it. I really haven't figured that out myself. Like, can you just imagine a boardroom with Big Pet Food? They have, waters on ice and dog kibble for them to chew on while they're sitting there, as if it was pretzels. Of course not. But in my mind, in my weird mind, I'm thinking, yeah, I'm hoping they're sitting there eating their garbage, but I know you're not. There's no way.
They're not.
Well, what's also great is you are 100% free of pentobarbital, which they cannot say that they aren't. They are. They have it.
Yeah.
You aren't. Right. That's a huge thing. That's a huge selling point right there. It's kind of like that MSG. No MSG kind of thing.
No. And the other thing is that there aren't any additives, especially in the protein and the vegetables, because all of the vegetables are single ingredient, and most of the proteins are either single ingredient or limited ingredient. And when these are made, if they're limited ingredient treats, there aren't any fillers in there like beet pulp or soy or wheat or anything to stretch the recipe. When you buy venison jerky or chicken jerky sticks or something like that from us, or kangaroo, it's 99% protein. And there's just enough other ingredients in there to bind it together to make it hold after it's smoked, and then to just enough of a vitamin E or rosemary extract to keep it shelf stable for a little bit of time. But that's it. Instead of buying something that is chock full of other stuff, rather than the venison or the kangaroo or the chicken or the beef that you bought, it's 99%. That's what it is.
So one thing that we know is that everything's fresh. You don't have a great deal of fillers, which, if you haven't noticed, there are a lot which will put a bunch of starches in there just to kind of mash it all up together, which drives me nuts. There's no bleach, which also drives me insane. That's one thing that we're always telling people. They'll say, "Oh, well," especially when it comes to adoption. Well, what's a good chew toy for them to chew on? What about these raw bones? It's like, no, they're awful. They're bleached. There's this, there's that. That's one thing that you've made a point. It's simple. It's clear. I love the fact that there's ginger cookies, or cheddar apple treats, which, again, I'm starting to get hungry. It's ready for dinner time in my world. I'm already starting to think that way. I love Puffetti. It has the idea of all things. Of course, I'm a stickler on creative words, but I'm weird like that. When you do have your sweet potato, which is, again, sweet potato, very good for dogs, and has started to finally make a major trend. And it's like, here's a simple thing: sweet potato cranberry bones. Very simple. It's to the point. It's right there. It's not like with added peas and this and more of this, and it's to the point. And with cats, you have the lamb lun cat treats. You know, a few of your different treats are actually in cat and dog. It's it's amazing how you were able to source everything and be able to develop such in just 8 years, which honestly 8 years, I mean, that's a lot. Your product line is extensive for 8 years. Most companies could be together for 15, 20 years and they don't even have half of what you have. That is commendable.
Thank you. It's just stuff that, comes like out of my, I don't know, it just comes out of my head somewhere, like the minnows, the Munchworthy minnows are fabulous for cats and dogs. And those are just, small little minnows that have been freeze dried, or the carp. Let's take an invasive fish that is not native to American waters and is really wreaking havoc on the ecosystem and the waterways in America, and let's turn it into a treat. So we're trying to stop the carp's march to the Great Lakes one treat at a time. But nobody else doing that with carp, and we're using every single body part except for the skeleton and the roe, and we're working on that right now.
And I would imagine if you ground down the bone, I mean, you might be able to use it. I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, we can. We can put it right now. The burgers, the raw carp burgers that we have are human grade. Those are the same carp burgers that are being eaten in restaurants in New York. But those are made in a human grade facility. So we could use the bones and put it in there along with the organs to make it a better grind for dogs. But because it's a human grade facility, they can't do that right now. So it's a little tricky, doing pet products in a human grade facility, because as long as you make the same products you would for human consumption, that's fine. But when you start altering them to be pet products, then you have to work on separate machines in a separate area of the building, and all that sort. Everything has to be separate because it's not FDA approved,
right?
So, or USDA. So it's a little bit tricky, but we're working on that.
Was it hard to find an actual manufacturer that you could actually do this, especially in the U.S.? Was that a challenge?
No, because I'm very resourceful. And I looked for the chicken jerky. I looked for probably about 6 or 7 months, and to find someone that I was really, really happy with. And the supplier that I have has been with me for a really, really long time, almost since the beginning. So once you have those people in your pocket, you nurture that relationship, because you want to trust who's making it, and the way that it's made, it needs to be very, very consistent, so that the first bite of chicken that a dog gets and the last one that the pet parent buys and gives to their pup needs to be just as good as the first one, because that's everything. If a pet parent doesn't have that same experience and the dog gets sick, or, something happens, with the change of the ingredients or the change of the recipe, that pet parent may never come back. And we want people to have this long relationship with us, because we're always thinking about other things we can do, like with the carp, so that dogs have options and cats have options and don't have to eat the same thing their entire lives, because that's pretty darn boring. If you had to eat the same thing every single meal every day of your life for 14 or 15 years, and that would be pretty awful. So we're working to give dogs and cats and animals a variety of choices, and pet parents can feel good about giving their dogs these treats and blends, these raw blends, so that they have variety, and they get, because with every variety there's something different. You get different nutrients from beef that you would from chicken than you will from lamb. So it's just that rotation of having different things that they can have to experience a lot of different flavors and the nutrients. It's just something that I feel pretty strongly about.
And it's been known to be very healthy for them to actually rotate their proteins. So
yeah,
it's definitely, and that's the other part about this. You're able to have all these varieties so people can be like, okay, well, for 2 weeks we're going to go down this direction, then we're going to shift proteins to something different, and then we're going to shift again, just to give that variety, to be able to give your dogs or cats a full variety, which again, back to the nutrition side, is key to everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Something else that you're doing that I thought was really cool is that you have the liver powder for the topper, you have chicken feet topper, and you have beef, which again, there it is. It's like you are making sure that we have everything possible for you to source and to create a perfect meal at home. Because a lot of people are always saying the same thing. I just don't have the time. How do I do it? Well,
right. There you go.
There it is, right there. And that's why I'm like, wow.
The reason that I started those was because when we got Ziva, our German Shepherd pup is now 2, but when she was just a wee thing, she wouldn't leave Scout alone. And during meal times, he would want to eat and she would want to play. And I thought, okay, got to do something to make her focus on her food. So I started taking treats off of, we have all of the treats in ball jars on our counter. And so I'd take some treats and, grind up or, rub them in my hands and put them on top of her food. Well, there you go. So she was focused on her food. And I found too that that's not only good for puppies, but it's good for senior dogs who may have a compromised immune system from chemotherapy, or they've just lost their appetite because they just don't want to, they don't feel good and they don't want to eat. So it's good for a lot of different reasons. It's not just good for puppies or for seniors or for dogs that are any age dogs that are going through any kind of illness or chemo or radiation, but it's good for that extra boost of protein or that extra flavor to give dogs, or those extra nutrients to give them that variety with, if you're going to serve a fish, maybe you want to top it with some chicken, or you've got some doggy ice cream, some pup-friendly ice cream, and you want to make a little sundae, you can put a topper on it and make it a special treat for a holiday.
There you go.
So there's a lot of different uses for that. Mm-hmm.
And you also have Ocean Supreme fish oil, which, again, a lot of people are like, a lot of people are afraid, well, where's the actual fish coming from? Is there this problem? Is there that problem? Well, again, you're taking all of those worries away by saying, okay, well, we have the farms that we're believing in, that we've been using. We know that this stuff isn't being shipped off. It's not going to Asia. It's not going to other places. It's not coming from there. You've made sure to cover those bases, which is what matters. And a lot of people don't realize that. That's peace of mind.
And all of those products where we have, like under the supplements, where we've got some the Connectin or the Enclover products or the fish oil, or even Pet Relief, the CBD oil, those are products that I use with my own dogs. Mm-hmm. And those actually have, we haven't put a Scout and Zoe's stamp of approval on it, but it's basically, that's what it is that, we feel strongly enough to give it, to trust the products and use them on our dogs. And we know people, pet parents particularly, have questions about those. So we're trying to make it easy for people to make really knowledgeable decisions without having to research it very, very deeply.
And see, that's the other part, is that CBD and hemp. I use it with our oldest Akita, the founder of this podcast, in a sense. She gets 3 of them a day at night, and it's remarkable. And yet people are like, but what about the high? Does she get high? No,
there's no THC in there.
Yeah.
We used them during the fireworks because Ziva was pretty wigged out from the fireworks, and it worked like a charm.
I keep hearing people were like, how did your dogs react? I'm like, dogs and cats didn't give 2 hoots about it. They were just like, whatever. But so many dogs, it is traumatizing. And whether it's 4th of July, it's New Year's, I guess we're just very lucky, even though where we're at, there's fireworks all over the place. Whether it's in the streets or it's down the way, we had tons of it, but none of our dogs or cats ever had that problem. But yeah, CBD, it works.
Hmm.
And again, that's how I always judge just how holistic somebody is. Are you willing to actually look into that? Are you willing to go that direction? And when I see that, like, again, doing my research, you've pretty much gone every single direction forward, and you're willing to look towards the future. Which, coming from Super Zoo, is there anything that has caught your attention saying, we need to actually start working in this particular form, whether it's more plant-based, insect-based, whatever it might be? Is there anything that has caught your attention? You're like, I'm going to start researching it and make a product from that?
Well, I'm focused more on the raw right now, frozen raw, because I've always wanted to do food, to be involved in food, and this is, since I feed the dogs raw now, I think that this is the direction that I'm going to go into. And we have the raw cart burgers, and I think I mentioned this maybe at the top of the podcast. I'm not certain, that we'll have 4 additional varieties of they won't be complete grinds, but they'll have the organs and the bones in them. So it's, you'd still have to supplement these grinds, but we'll have a lamb, beef with mackerel, and turkey. And adding those into the product line, forward the product line in an area where I think that there's tremendous growth, or possibility of tremendous growth, because more people are concerned with what their dogs are eating, because they want them to live longer. They want them to have really, really healthy lives. And I've personally seen the difference in just Scout and his intestinal issues that he had by just feeding him raw, just changing from a kibble diet to the raw. They don't have as much gas as they did before. They don't have the little eye boogers that they had. They don't drink as much water, because kibble is very dehydrating, and and Scout's intestinal issues are gone. His stomach doesn't rumble and flip flop around, and just and their coats are real nice and shiny, and they're happy all the time, and they just have this spring in their step that they just didn't have from eating kibble. So that's how the product line is going to forward. And I see that that's a huge movement in the pet industry, is to have more people understand raw feeding, that it's not this, you're not going to get botulism or something, or
E. coli.
the dogs are eating E. coli or have salmonella poisoning, that it's just like fixing raw food for yourself. We cook it for ourselves, but they can, some people lightly cook a food for their dogs, but my dogs eat totally raw food. And I've seen the difference, and I'm a big believer in it, and I'm not the only one.
Right.
So I see that that's the direction for me. And we'll always have jerkies and bakery treats and vegetables, but I want to add to the raw offerings, the frozen raw, and really grow that, because I think that there's unlimited potential there.
And honestly, by the time we release this, I'm pretty sure Scout and Zoe's will be much bigger than it already is. And of course, with your Facebook Live, I mean, like I said, you're right there on top of it. And I can honestly say it's always just a pleasure being able to have a great conversation, whether it's on, on the podcast right now or even off. I mean, you're absolutely exactly like this off the podcast. Let everybody know she's exactly like this. Cindy is like this completely. You're funny and engaging, and that's what makes you so interesting to me, and what I find to be entertaining. So, it's just an absolute pleasure to be able to sit down and have some time to talk with you.
Thank you.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that we should actually make sure we cover before we have to sign off?
I don't think so. I mean, if anybody has any questions, they can direct them to you and or me. You can find me. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. It's all Scout and Zoe, all spelled out. And follow us, tell us your stories, get in touch with us. And if you have questions about the products, we're happy to talk.
And I'll tell you, if there's anything that anybody wants to do that's fun, just watch her Facebook Live. I mean, seriously. I had tagged a couple people that I knew were out there at the event, and I know that they were really busy, so I don't think you were able to engage with them. But you know what? You are on top of it. You are a celebrity in this industry, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, and come back anytime and share more stories with us. And as always, you know that when you're live, I'm probably watching.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me on today.
It's been a pleasure. Well, I'm Chris Green. Have a fantastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.